So here we are, ladies and gents, BMW's most anticipated, but equally most controversial car in a very long time. Meet the new 4 Series. So we all know the 4 Series has been a runaway success for BMW, the coupe, more sporting variant of the highly successful 3 Series. Great ingredients, though this car comes with the caveat of wearing BMW's latest design language, which for the past few years has been controversial to say the least. I can't avoid it anymore. That grille is gopping, and some of my colleagues who've been around this car a little bit longer than I have said they've grown used to it. They say that it's become a bit more manageable, and maybe with a European number plate it does break up just the sheer size of that cheese grater on its nose. And granted, in this more subtle specification, it doesn't look quite so offensive. Is it something that I'm going to grow to like more over time? Quite possibly, but ultimately it doesn't matter what I think. Grille aside, BMW have done a pretty good job in mixing together bold styling statements with muscular shoulders, but also a more elegant teardrop roofline and flowing elements. This is not the big beefy 4 Series of a few generations ago. This is a much more sleek, modern take. Something that erases a lot of those really hard lines we've seen in cars, and certainly it's a more elegant vehicle overall. For the UK, M Sport is actually the base trim, and that means you get plenty of sporting trinkets as standard. Things like those sharp LED lights, smart multi-spoke alloy wheels, generally more sporting profiles to the front and rear of the car. Again, this specification is quite subtle, but I think it really works. The interior is typical BMW, and that is by no means a negative. Beautiful, high-quality materials, neat stitching, and great ergonomics bring together a cabin that's just generally a nice place to sit over lengthy periods of time. These highly adjustable blue-stitched sport seats have nice levels of bolstering around your ribs, but not too much around the shoulders, which is great for covering long distances. Standard on the 4 Series is a 10.25-inch touchscreen infotainment system that runs the latest variant of BMW's iDrive. I say it time and time again, but iDrive is pretty untouchable at the moment for how simple and easy and graphically impressive it is. Something else that's impressive is the standard digital display for the driver. Nice clear instrumentation, and of course it's customizable to your liking. Obviously, if you're after rear passenger space, you should be looking at a BMW 3 Series, but the 4 Series can seat 4. 2 in the rear actually have reasonably generous levels of legroom, though the sloping roofline does quickly eat into headroom. A good degree of practicality is also retained in the boot, which is 440 litres. We've covered the looks and we've covered the touchy-feely stuff inside the car. What about the way it drives? Because that's arguably one of the most important factors of a 4 Series. Well, this particular car is a 420D, and that means that it's powered by a 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged diesel engine. And thanks to this car being an xDrive model, an 8-speed automatic transmission helps translate that performance to all 4 wheels. There's also a mild hybrid system at play, just to keep this diesel engine the right side of European emissions laws, and ultimately it churns out 188 brake horsepower and 400 Newton-meters of torque, so certainly no slouch. The balance of power of late has not swung in diesel's favour, that's for sure, with many governments actually actively encouraging people to ditch them. But actually, there are scenarios where a diesel engine still remains king. If you're doing lengthy motorway journeys, it's still one of the most efficient means of travel. And this 2-litre, it's perfectly silky smooth for those lengthy, long-legged stretches on the M3. There is a little bit of road noise creeping into the cabin, but ultimately the engine is near silent. It's very smooth, there's not any sort of troublesome vibration, and it sets the tone for a nice, relaxing drive home after a long day in the office. Of course, one of the other benefits of the diesel engine is some nice low-end shove. There's loads of torque low in the rev range, which means progress is actually pretty swift, far faster than the 7.4 seconds 0 to 62 on paper seemingly suggests. And this nice big slug of torque makes the engine really flexible to use, so around town it's plenty quick enough to take an advantage out of a junction, but also when cruising it's got the get up and go for a bold overtaking manoeuvre or two. Mash the throttle and after just a flicker of turbo lag, progress is pretty swift. There's a bit of an augmented noise that comes through the speakers. It doesn't sound bad, but it definitely sounds synthesized. But I suppose that's just something we've gotten used to with BMWs over the years. Now, as mentioned, this car is an M Sport model, and that means it comes standard with a fairly sporty suspension setup. But this specific car has been optioned with adaptive dampers. And I've been blown away actually by the difference that the selectable drive modes make in this car. So in comfort, with the nice light steering and the dampers in their softest setting, on some rather terrible surfaces we've been driving over today, it just soaks up the lumps and bumps. It really is remarkably comfortable. Considering the size of alloy wheels on this car, and considering the sporty nature of the coupe, yeah, you could really do some grand touring in this. It's very comfortable, very cosseting. There's only a light shudder that comes through the cabin, and that's at the real worst of times. Generally, with little ripples in the road, you hardly feel them whatsoever. Now you push sport and you can immediately feel the suspension firm up. All of a sudden the little ripples and bubbles and bumps in the road are translated through the cabin a bit more, which is arguably a negative, but it does translate into less body roll through the corners with the suspension coiled up a little bit more. There's also more weighting to the steering, which, yeah, okay, it's not the most communicative in the world, but that's the same with all of these electronic steering systems now. It's very precise and very confidence inspiring actually. The front end of this car, there is so much grip, and that teamed with a more responsive throttle results in actually a really good car to throw around. Now the 4 Series is actually 23mm wider than a 3 Series, and that means it has a little bit more road holding, and combine that with the xDrive all-wheel drive system and there's some really reassuring grip to be had in all weathers. The 50-50 weight distribution of this chassis just means there's a beautiful, predictable balance through the bends, and how positively the nose turns in for apexes is easily one of the most impressive parts of this package. There's a true sense of agility to this new 4 Series. All of the driver controls are really predictable, there's a nice linear motion to everything, you can modulate the brake pedal really nicely, and the increased steering weight in sport definitely improves things. But something that I think is a real asset is that you can customize sport mode. So again, on these battered roads, the softer suspension is more suited, but I greatly prefer the weightier steering. It means that I can just have it both ways. There is also an adaptive mode that will make these changes based upon your driving behaviour and any feedback the car's getting from the road beneath it. Now, of course, another reason why you might buy a 420d is for efficiency. And according to the new WLTP testing, this gains 54 to 57 mpg, which isn't bad at all. I've always really liked 420ds for that blend of efficient diesel engine and a really sporty chassis beneath you. It's genuinely good fun to drive and also relaxing on longer journeys. If you fancy having one of these 420d xDrives on your driveway, it costs from £44,640. And if I'm totally honest, I think that's a lot of car for your money. Certainly a lot of grille for your money. The age-old mantra of beauty only being skin deep is perfectly embodied in four-wheel form here, because whilst the 4 Series looks might be Marmite to some, the underpinnings are arguably one of the most competent Series BMWs there has ever been. Head to YesAuto.com for the latest car news and reviews, and don't forget to check us out on social media. We're in all the usual places such as Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Simply search for YesAuto.